welcome to this little stream here. Let's get into it. But before we do, let's play a little blues. All right. Little philosophy today. Let's talk. This topic is, sometimes it's good to zoom out. Instead of just focusing in on one technique or one subject or topic, let's zoom out for a minute. I mean, we have a focus to talk about, which is technique and emotion. But I would like to say that it's important to take a step back in your playing every once in a while, especially when it comes to making progress. So that's what we're going to do today. That's it. That's all I'm trying to say. I have no idea if anybody's here because I can't get to my video at the moment, but I'll assume that everything's a go. Maybe I should double check before I get too deep into this. That was a G harmonica played in second position, just in case you're wondering. Second position is the kind of go-to for a lot of people, but I think it's really cool to, like I said in the last live stream, start exploring the other positions and getting into that. But let's talk about this topic. Before I jump all the way in, I want to say this Saturday is the class with Joe Falisco, and the topic is Sonny Terry. So if you're not signed up, I'll put the link in the video description. Great time to be a member at Harmonica 123 because Adam Gusso's coming next month in class. We're going to be co-teaching. So if you became a member now, you would have a chance to attend both of those classes right out of the gates. What a time to do that. So emotion, technique, let's talk about it. So I almost titled this video, which comes first, emotion or technique? And I know everyone would be like, emotion, of course. We can be emotional without the technique. But I want to talk about this. This is big. I feel like this is big. I'm all fired up. What I want to say is the following, is that the essence of what I want to communicate to you today is that certainly we lead with emotion. When we're playing music and when we're developing and we don't have enough technique, we can lead with emotion. It's something that's always available. However, it is often the hardest thing to access as a beginner with lack of confidence and tools like technique to express yourself. It's hard to be emotional. It can be very messy and it exposes you and it makes you feel vulnerable. So what is the relationship that they have together? And I really want to talk about this. This is going to be cool to get into, and I'll obviously check the chat here in a minute and take a break. But I noticed quickly a couple important things about the connection between and the relationship between technique and emotion. I learned that if I harnessed emotion and focused on it enough that sometimes technique would come out that I didn't think I possessed or that I was capable of. I could accomplish things in those hyper focused emotional moments, technically speaking, that I didn't think I could do. I also noticed on looking at it from the other direction is that once the technique itself started to sharpen, I can more easily access the emotion. I see technique as a vehicle for emotion. Pardon me. It's a way for you to express yourself on a higher level. So it's like we all come to the game or the party with the same, in possibly a similar amount of emotion and excitement for being musical and making music. But some of us acquire the skills necessary to do that a little bit quicker than others. That doesn't mean that they're better. Maybe the person who goes slower is going to refine their technique. But there's this direct correlation between your ability to be as emotional as possible with your music and also technically sort of strong with your approach. So I know for me, when I center myself around techniques and being as exact as I can with playing bends or any technique on the harmonica, that I can put more emotion into that and I can fine tune it. And that's something that takes a while for I think a lot of people to really grasp and process. So I'm just pointing this out to you that if you haven't thought about it, when you practice, these two elements are always there whether you give them attention or not. In other words, if you're not practicing and playing with a lot of emotion, there's by default a lack of connection to the instrument. And when you're not putting attention on the technique, there's this lack of ability to be as emotional as you can, in my opinion. In my opinion, I realize that there's players that don't have a lot of technique that are very emotional, but I would argue that those are the players that would benefit the most potentially from working on sharpening their technique so that it can raise to the level of the emotion and then even have a greater impact, a much greater impact. And that's something that's definitely more a conversation. There's less like, how do we practice this, right? Everything, you can't shove everything into a perfect little practice session. It's not like that. I know. I was thinking about this right before I jumped on today. Like, this is something I want to talk about, but it's hard to talk about this. It's very personal and it's very experiential, maybe. It's different for everybody. In other words, there's a lot of people that go about learning harmonica and are very by the books. The emotion doesn't come until years later, or maybe never comes. And there's other people that are very emotional again, and the technique never fully develops. And why is that so important? I want to talk about that angle for a minute. Emotional, sloppy players. If that's you, don't feel bad. I'm not picking on you. We've all been there to some degree, hopefully, and that's a good thing to some extent early on in our playing. You know, that's good because that means you're trying to make an emotional connection, but it's just sloppy. So if that's you, say less. Work on refining your technique, your single notes and bends to start. And it'll serve you so much better. You'll be saying so much more with your music when you come from that perspective than trying to just work through the exercises and the classes that I provide or scales and all of this type of thing. Good morning, everybody. I know I just went right into the rant here. Good morning. Good to see you. I see some members tuning in as well. Charlie, good to see you. Good morning, Martin and Ted. What's up, man? So y'all see what I'm saying, though? This is where I'm coming from today. There are times that when I'm at when life is throwing stuff at you and you'd think music would be the perfect outlet, right? As it always has been for me often in the past. There's times at least in my life where it's not where I want to go. Where I don't have an inclination to pick up the harmonica. It's not calling me. And that kind of freaks me out because it's such a big part of my life. It's not only my passion, but it's my living. it's my way of life. It is what I do every single day. Something is centered around typically the harmonica, and it's positive. So back to this topic of emotion and technique. If you are developing maybe what you could do is step back for a second and think about your own playing and think about which category do you fall into today? Do you feel like you're more of an emotional player, or do you feel like you're more of a technical player? You should be able to sort of put it through the sieve. Is that the word I'm figure out, distill it down and say, which am I? And so I strive to be as high as I can in both those categories. I want to be a very technical player and emotional. And some days that changes. Some days I feel less emotionally connected to my instrument, and other days I feel more of that emotional connection. And some days it's the other way around. It's the technique is really sharp, but something's lacking. So I'm always trying to bring those together. The goal is that they're matched, and you will see how well technique will serve you. And here's the interesting part about this, by the way. I know I'm having tangents constantly, but I lost my thought, I think. Technique. Oh, is that like, I think that, I don't know where I was going to go with that, but it can be easily derail you, technique. There's nothing worse than, like if there's no emotion in music, right? And we're listening to somebody play and their just technique is really phenomenal, but it's just not saying anything. So how do you get, as maybe a segue for this topic is like, again, figure out where you are first though. Where do you fall? Most people, it's pretty clear until you get to, I've been playing harmonica now for almost 30 years. That's crazy. And today I had a really nice conversation with my buddy Adam Gussa because we have a class coming up next month. I'll just quickly mention what that's about. Let me bring some notes up. I took some notes when we were talking, and I want to look at it real quick. Okay. So the topic is like lessons from the journey is the class we're teaching, and some of the things we're going to be talking about are direct examples of things we learned in our musical journey and how that made us the players we are today. How does it all fit together? Whether it's a lick I learned from a player or an experience I had, or what I learned about stage stuff, etiquette, or setting an amp. We're going to go all in many directions during this class, but hopefully we distill it with these tangible takeaways for everybody. I know Adam's going to have some notes. I might have a couple notes that I create as well. So you've got tangible stuff, but we just talked, and one of the things that came up for me was a memory, a core transitional point in my playing, and it was a memory, and it relates to this topic. It was a memory from 1990. I'm pretty sure it was 97. It could have been 98, but I think it was 1997. So I was very green, very early in my playing, and I was in Florida visiting my brother. So again, I had only been playing harmonica maybe a couple of years at most, maybe less. And I had the opportunity to meet and sit in with Big Jack Johnson. And if you don't know who that is, he was a legend. He's no longer with us, but Delta Blues man. I didn't know how big of a deal he was when I walked into that room, and I didn't know what the opportunity meant or what it would mean to me later on. But talk about one of the scariest things in my life, and emotionally, I had to rise to the occasion, so to speak, and emotionally pull my shit together, I guess, is one way to put it out there. Like, I had to be brave enough to stand up in front of people I'd never performed. Here I was, there was a huge crowd, and I'm going to go and sit in with this guy who is a legend. I knew he was a big deal because just by the way he was dressed, he looked so sharp that night. That was the one side of it. And the other battle I had to take on, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, was the technique. I was kind of still learning, going through the ranks. So I chose to keep it simple, which was the right move. I may not have been, the best harmonica player around at the time. That's for sure. in maybe in that bar, who knows? There was somebody better than me, but I kept it simple and I made an emotional connection with the audience and it changed my life. That moment was the most pivotal moment of my entire trajectory of wanting to be a musician, how serious I wanted to take it, etc. So a big takeaway is figuring out where you are and then getting some direction into where you need to spend time. So let me just say this. If you're a very technical player and you tend to be type A, is that maybe that's the wrong term, but it's kind of falls into that category of type A and structure and but you're not as quick to reveal your emotion and you don't feel that strong emotional connection when you play like you might be nervous but you don't feel like you're making that emotional connection. Spend more time working on that. And the other way around, if you have a strong emotional connection but it's coming out pretty sloppy, slow down, turn off the emotion and work on all the technical stuff. And then together you can merge these topics as you make progress in each category. And that's what I think about with this stuff. What is going on with you guys? I'm curious to hear if anybody is willing to put it out there. There's the chat. Let me just look at the chat. Good morning, everybody. Again, how is it for you? Which category do you lean into? And what are you doing to grow the other category so it's bolstering? You want to support, they each support one another. Thanks, Randall. Harmonica Man Randy says hit the like. I would appreciate it if you hit the like button. It helps me reach more folks. Of course, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel so I can hang out. Why am I doing this? This is like Howie Mandel move. Subscribe so I can keep in touch with you and you can get notified when I'm going live and all that good stuff. Right on, Double H. We're just talking about emotion and technique and how they correlate. Yeah, what do you do when life is so crappy that you don't even feel like picking up the harp? I'm going to tell you what I do sometimes when things get tough. In the past, what I've done is very simple. When I don't have the motivation to pick up the harmonica, which says a lot because, it's everything. It is my outlet, but it also brings me all this joy and all these things, right? I think the key is to honor that and to step away from it and not force it and wait for it to come back around. And what you can do in the meantime is be listening to music. It's, get your brain out of where it's at, and pull it out by just some distraction and focus on listening, like just listening. And it doesn't need to be harmonica music. It could be anything. It doesn't need to be blues. It could be anything. Music is a powerful thing. I listen to music all day, every day. I'm sure there's a lot of you like that. But like when I'm not doing this or teaching a lesson or teaching a class or preparing, even when I'm preparing, I'm listening. But music is on. Always. Almost always. So for me, I think sometimes it's fine to step away from all that. And we need to step away from it. And if you don't feel like listening to music, get outside. I'm not a therapist, but go outside and do something out in nature. Take a walk. Do something that reconnects you with your own mind and body. You have to make love to it. I like that. That's the key to sound, making it sound good. It's hard though. Again, without the technique, often beginners are afraid to be vulnerable. I was. I had no emotional connection because I was. Let me explain this. This is important. I had a strong emotional connection to it, but I had no ability to bring that emotional connection into the instrument while playing it. Raise your hand if you're in that category. Put it in the chat. How many people feel like that? Like, God, I love this music. I do feel a connection to it, but as soon as I start playing it around people in a small group or on a stage, or my nerves take over and I can't express that emotion. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. to simultaneously, you know, make music, play the instrument, and be emotional. How do you do that? You got to slow down and play less. You really do. It's like your ability to harness and focus that emotion is dependent on you opening the floodgates only so far to your ability level. So if you're a beginner, stop trying to do all these things you're not capable of yet when you actually go to play. Do that in practice. That's just my thought on it. So Fantastic Fish says, I'm definitely not the technical type. I'm sloppy. I use it as therapy for my emotions. Excellent. For IRL stuff, it got so bad I messed up my throat playing. Yeah, I messed up my lips, my hands sometimes playing too much early on. But take something very technical and exercise a scale and see what happens, something that you can slow down to your pace and see what happens when you try to play that with the feel, making everything count. Because I guarantee you, over 90% of the people, when they work through, wrote stuff, like or let's say scale or drier material that it's harder to be emotional. That's what's happening. They don't have a connection. So here's just a quick example. Instead of going the blues scale, play each note way slower and shape it and have a moment with it. Bring some texture, some technique, hold these notes out. Do something that forces you to feel what you're doing. The whole goal for me is when I'm playing is that not a single note gets overlooked. There's equal value into everything, emotional value. And you can only do that when you have the technique to support it. So this is that, I haven't talked about this enough, but like the technique is a funnel for emotion, I think. It's a way to shape it further. So you could be really emotional and sloppy, and people will clap and relate and connect with you. I've seen that plenty of times. But what happens when the technique keeps growing? So does the emotion, because it is the vehicle, it is the way that we harness the emotion and express it to its highest level so that somebody can feel it. Think about William Clark. He's a great example of a player who is so emotional, but he is one of the most technical players on the planet. Therefore, he is arguably one of the most emotional. I'd go back to that because of this duality, this ability to bring the two together. He is my favorite example of that. Kim Wilson's a great example, but there's a lot of players that are great examples. James Cotton's a great example. Super emotional. Not as technical as Clark, though, but certainly very technical. Like, has total control over his instrument. It's always the same tempo for me and I never advanced. Well, work on, it's funny how, Greg, we come up with our own, we know ourselves better than anybody. You just said it. If you're always playing at the same tempo, like when you improvise, work on a strategy for practicing changing the tempo. Essentially, I think you're talking about phrasing, but I could be wrong. But if it's tempo as it relates to the way that you're playing when you solo, narrow, then get very analytical with, and analyze what would help me in that category. Working on triplets, working on staccato versus legato and things like that. All right, Sweden Harmonica says, I play with, according to me, not so much emotion, right? I think I focus on the clinical playing and play correct. But so you're not alone. I need more emotion. I play rather than love just playing so much. So you can work on that in some of the ways that I've just started to explain by simplifying what you're working on. If it's a piece of music, play it at a different tempo, slow it down. If you can play it well at 100 BPM, beats per minute, then what happens when you bring it to 90? or maybe you only need an adjustment of 5 BPM. Can you bring more emotion in, or do you still feel just as disconnected? Did you feel a shift? And yes, you'll have to be very deliberate with how you're now engaging when you slow it down. Like, are you going to bring in certain techniques over those notes to color them? Or is it just that you're going to focus on the emotion? Like, what will you do? It's hard to talk about this. Truly, it is. Yeah, Chance, I hear you, man. Sometimes you just force yourself to pick it up and you feel better. And it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. Sometimes it pulls me out of a rut just by, and sometimes I crave it so much that I want to pick it up and play it, like crazy. I'll sit there and get lost in the moment for like 30 minutes just playing a jam style thing. And other times it's like, nah, I don't want to pick it up at all. But it's like kickstarting though. Sometimes if you pick it up, it helps, even when you don't think you want to. I don't mean to be a therapist, Jane. Ah, okay. Hi, Yana. All right. So, yeah, listening is one way, but maybe here's another thing to think about. And I'm not a therapist, so I'm just shooting from the hip here. But like, find out what are all the things that inspire you. It's a circle. If you're feeling lack of motivation, where's the inspiration? If you can't find the inspiration, where's the search? What have you been doing? Sometimes it's just getting out into nature, or maybe it's connecting with friends, or going to see a live show, or going to see something unrelated to music, like going to an art exhibit. But you get inspired, or you see something beautiful, happening out in the world that reminds you that you're a part of this and that you can bring some of that back into your music. Yeah, I'm going off the deep end here. Listening is key, though. We don't listen enough. I guarantee you, if you're wondering whether you listen to and digest enough music without the harmonica in your hand or in your mouth, most folks cannot answer that yes, they do. Because what comes in here is eventually what's going to come out of your instrument, your harmonica, and you need to feed it well. You need to plant those seeds. Charlie says, I think the favorite compliment I ever got was when I sat in with a band down in Florida for a couple songs, and a guy came up afterwards and said, I could really feel what you were playing. That is the highest compliment, for sure. If we were pitting this down into like really, Ronnie, what's more important? Emotion is, but how can we be super emotional when we don't feel the direct technical connection to our instrument? It's very difficult. It can be done. Again, you know, I've heard a lot of sloppy players, and they're in it. Like, I'm believing what they're playing to a degree, but it's not communicating with me. It's not really connecting all the way and firing on all cylinders for me emotionally. The technique harnesses the emotion. But that's awesome when you can make somebody feel what you're doing, because that's the job. That's our job. Our job is to tell a story, make somebody communicate emotion. So yeah. And that's in chance, that's it. You love playing, but performing kind of sucks. Why? We place expectations on ourselves. We criticize ourselves constantly when we're trying to be in the moment and be emotional and express. We're afraid. Performing can be a task. It can be unbearable for some people. And for other people, they're just super excited and can't wait to get up, even though they can't play very well. Everyone's different. For me, I was petrified of playing in front of other people. And it was all or nothing. And when no one was around, I knew I had something going on that was like, something's happening. I can do this. And I was so emotionally connected up here with the instrument, but the technique hadn't drawn me all the way into where I could bring the two together. Yeah, double H. Two best compliments that you get is that you know how to lay back and compliment others, and that you play with emotion. Those are great. Those are great compliments and feedbacks to get because knowing how to lay back is powerful. When you're not playing, the emotion should be right up here, like if this is like all the way at the top and I'm being, literal and figuratively speaking, like when you have heightened emotion and you're going, when you're not playing, you carry all that emotion in your face and in your body, you know, because if you can lay back, you're building up it's building up again so that when you put the instrument back in your lips, bam, there it is. It comes back. Versus you kind of letting it kind of getting distracted and whatever. Stay in that moment. So that's a huge compliment. And learning to lay back is everything because it's when you do that, it makes everything that you play so much stronger. So that's a good one. Right on. Fantastic Fish picked up rhythms of breath. For more technical exercises, going even through the first exercises helps a ton. Articulation and breathing right. Good stuff. I do not know Kurt, Greg. I might look him up though. So look at people connecting here in the chat. Isn't that lovely to see people like, where do you live, man? I'm in Portland. Somebody's trying to connect with another Portland person. I love this. This is what it's a connection. For me, I'll wrap this conversation up by saying that the music was a couple things. It was an emotional release for sure. It was my ability to finally express these emotions, which maybe had been shoved away somewhere. And it was a confidence builder for me. It allowed me to do something and feel like I had this ability, this something special, that I possess something special and that I'm doing something powerful with it. A feeling that I never really had as a kid growing up. I didn't feel accomplished about much of anything. I struggled in school. I was told that I never applied myself, which is sort of true, but also I couldn't apply myself. My brain was a mess. It still is kind of. But I hadn't learned how to work with that, with my own brain and body. And so music came in and was this thing that said, hey, you can do this and you can do it well and you can impact people. That was a big light bulb moment that it wasn't just about me. It was about, there's two reasons why I play music. One is to express myself fully and to let it out. It's who I am. It's part of me. And the other is to make a connection with people. And I mean emotional connection. To me, that's powerful if you can have somebody come up to you and say, wow, that really moved me, or that healed a part of me. These are things I've heard over the years. I was working through something really tough, and this music was very healing, or maybe it's it lifted me up in a time of darkness, or maybe it inspired me. God, I want to go play this instrument. There's a million things that you don't realize. It's like a ripple effect. Not only that you have on the people that hear you, but then whatever those people do in their lives, and that ripples out further. Maybe they become even higher level musician than you will ever be. I have some examples of students that became amazing players, and it's like, whoa! Now they're, because of something I did early on for them, and now they're spreading all that. That's crazy. It's never ending. So work on your technique, work on your emotion, get them to work together. That's kind of the talk today. And I hope to see some of you Saturday with Joe Falisco talking about Sonny Terry. Joe is a master harmonica player and teacher, and Sonny Terry is his favorite artist. So this is going to be a very good class. We've been communicating. He is psyched about doing it. You can go to harmonica123.com right on the homepage and learn more if you just want to buy a ticket or become a member, and you'll gain access to that class. And then there's another great class coming up with Adam Gusso in June, Lessons from the Journey. I'm really looking forward to all this good stuff happening. I appreciate you all being here live. Right on, Marco. Thanks for bringing up Funky Blues Harmonica 18 years ago. Was it really? Jeez. Yeah, it must have been. It sounds about right. I'm glad that motivated you to stick with the harp. Put yourself out there. You never know who you might resonate with. That's a good one. I like that. Right on, Thomas. Thanks. I am trying to pay some of this forward and share my experiences and knowledge as it relates to music and harmonica. I will say that as the years go on, it is harder for me to find the type of inspiration maybe that I found in the early years of it being so new. When I first shared those very first videos in 2006, it was still, even though I had been playing for 9, 10 years already, almost right around 9 years, it still felt extremely new to me. I was that's early on in your playing still, and I still had a lot to learn, but I was so excited about connecting with everybody and putting up I'll never forget putting up a video and then like going through the comments and being like, how is this happening? How are all these people tuning in? It was crazy. And thanks to all of you, you changed my life, and the harmonica became the central focus of my life instead of me floating between part-time jobs. Good God, that was a crazy time. So at any rate, appreciate you all being here today. This was a fun one. Hope to see you on Saturday. Check the video description in a few minutes for updates with links and all that good stuff. And I will see you on the next one.